this? Well, Amanda Serrano took to Twitter and addressed the prospect of the Katie Taylor fight entering into renegotiations. And she said, in all fairness to Katie, based on her popularity, I'd settle for a 60-40 split. I know she brings more than most to the table, but because it's the biggest female fight that can be made, 80-20 or 70-30 is ridiculous. I'll continue to do me if they don't agree.
I can tell you they're not going to agree.
I can tell you that's not going to happen. Behind how things went down, the first time that contracts were actually signed, you understand.
They were.
She was 3 fights into the deal.
This ain't the same thing as talks fizzling out.
This isn't the same thing as two separate parties not being able to reach a deal. In this situation, a deal was reached. Contracts were signed.
And the fight still didn't happen.
There is no other way to describe what took place here other than Team Serrano reneging on the deal.
It's pretty much what happened.
And whether you sympathize with Amanda or you don't sympathize with Amanda, regardless of how you feel about it isn't going to entice the Katie Taylor people to re-enter into negotiations with Amanda, not with things having worked out the way they worked out. Moreover, Amanda is saying that she wants 40% of the pot, and I really don't see that happening. Between how things worked out with the first set of negotiations, the first deal that actually was reached, the deal that was waffled on, between that and Amanda's sticking point that she wants 40% of the pot, well, I don't see Eddie Hearn, I don't see Brian Peters giving Amanda Serrano 40% of the pot. I don't.
This isn't about vilifying anyone.
I'll leave such judgments up to you, the listener. I'm just telling you what I think, and if you want to know what I think and you're here, so I'll assume that you do, I can't see Eddie Hearn, I can't see Brian Peters giving up 40% of the pot to Amanda Serrano. Not when most of the revenue generated for the fight will be coming from Katie Taylor's adoring public, Katie Taylor's adoring fans. That's who's bringing the money to the table.
You have to understand, Katie Taylor's got a lot of options.
And whether you want to accept it or not, or Amanda wants to accept it or not, the fight between her and Amanda isn't the biggest fight, at least not revenue-wise, not in terms of marquee value. Katie Taylor could take on Natasha Jonas in a rematch of sorts, as these two fighters met in the amateur ranks years ago. Katie Taylor beat Natasha Jonas. If they had that same fight in the professional ranks, it would do substantially more business than an Amanda Serrano fight. The reason for that is, what fans Amanda has here stateside, are these the kind of fans that are going to travel, going to get their passports out, go over there to the United Kingdom, where in all likelihood the fight would take place? Are these the kind of fans that are going to flock over there, buy a ticket?
Are they?
Get a seat? Aren't these the kind of fans that will board a plane to cross the Atlantic Ocean, enter into hostile territory to support their fighter the way that Ricky the Hitman Hatton's fans did for the Floyd Mayweather Jr. fight? Are Amanda's fans those kinds of fans? Because I hate to break the news to you, if those aren't the kind of fans that she's got, if those fans don't show up in terms of ticket sales and revenue generated, then asking for 40% of the pot is ludicrous. It's not going to happen. Whereas with Natasha Jonas and her fans, her supporters, given how much momentum she gained after the performance she gave in the Terry Harper fight, behind that and her fans being over there in the United Kingdom, you don't have to worry about fans having to travel across the Atlantic Ocean. The fans are right there.
This is an inconvenient truth.
And I know that some of you out there might not like to hear this, but Taylor versus Jonas is actually a bigger fight, revenue-wise, in terms of marquee value. That's a bigger fight than Taylor versus Serrano. There's still a lot of people out there that think the United States is the center of the world. They still think that the United States is the center of the universe, and the only place to generate any money is here in America.
No, it ain't.
Nothing could be further from the truth. Taylor versus Jonas in the United Kingdom generates more money, puts more asses in more seats than Taylor versus Serrano anywhere else in the world.
The same is true of Taylor versus Cameron.
Those are two fights that Eddie Hearn can make that would generate more revenue, generate more business than an Amanda Serrano fight, mostly because the people over there in the United Kingdom are more familiar with those two fighters than they are with Amanda Serrano. Moreover, they have a rapport with those fighters that they don't have with Amanda. Those are homegrown fighters to them, and we all know how the Brits love to support their own homegrown fighters. You're not going to get the reaction for Taylor versus Serrano that you get for Taylor versus Jonas or Taylor versus Cameron, as these are fighters that Katie Taylor beat in the amateur ranks years ago. There's backstory, the stage is set, and the rivalry's already there, whereas, with Amanda...
That's the problem.
I don't believe for a second that either Eddie Hearn or Brian Peters would be okay with giving Amanda Serrano 40% of the pot when they know that there are bigger fights out there for Katie that'll generate more business where, you know what, maybe they ain't got to give the girl 40% of the pot. Maybe they give the girl 30.
But it's 30% of a much bigger fight.
It's 30% of a much bigger pot. This is business, folks, and you can't address the subject of the splits without addressing that.
You don't have to like it, it's still the truth.
If I'm being honest, I'd wager that the winner of Breakus versus McCaskill 2 would sooner get 40% of a Katie Taylor fight before Amanda Serrano would, mostly because the winner of that fight is going to be in possession of all the world titles in the welterweight division. They're going to be bringing that to the table, and that is leverage in some ways. Yes, it is. The winner of that fight would have something that Katie Taylor wants. That would be the winner of that fight's bargaining chip. With Amanda, that's not the case.
She's not bringing any titles that Katie's going to fight for.
There really is no bargaining chip there. So if the question is, can Amanda Serrano get 40% of a Katie Taylor fight with things having happened the way they happened, and, where we are right now, what's on the table for Katie aside from Amanda? If the question is, can Amanda somehow negotiate 40% of a Katie Taylor fight? In my humble opinion, the answer is no.
Eddie and Brian won't agree to that.
I don't think Amanda Serrano should broach this subject any further, or even field questions in reference to it. I think she needs to leave the past in the past and accept that that fight isn't going to happen, and neither Eddie Hearn or Brian Peters is going to give her 40% of a Katie Taylor fight.
A lot of people still feel raw about it.
And I know this because I see what kind of comments those people leave under my videos whenever the subject is broached. I see what kind of comments they leave on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, what kind of comments circulate on social media whenever that fight is brought up. A lot of people, they still feel raw about that fight not happening. They feel that Amanda Serrano priced herself out of the fight, and at this point, they feel that she doesn't deserve it. At this point, discussing that subject in any capacity for Amanda is simply bad press, and I don't think she should discuss it any further.
It opens old wounds.
She's just got to get back out there, continue to perform, and allow people to forget.
Allow people to focus on what's actually happening. Because that fight, that's what's not happening.
Neither Eddie Hearn or Brian Peters are going to give Amanda Serrano 40%. They're just not. In heavyweight news, there's been a nasty rumor going around, a rather nasty rumor, that Rick Glacier addressed boxing insider Rick Glacier, who's quoted as saying, a fight Al Heyman, PBC, tried to make, IBF eliminator Deontay Wilder versus Charles Martin, has fallen apart, as Wilder demanded money not printable since Wilder was KO'd by Tyson Fury and lost his title. Another fine example of Wilder not being in reality since his loss. #boxing. I'm sure that many of you out there have already heard about this rumor that maybe a week or two ago, maybe about three, there were rumblings of a potential Deontay Wilder versus Charles Martin fight, and that would be Wilder's first fight since having lost the WBC title to Tyson Fury in February of last year. I'm sure that most of you heard about those rumblings the same way I'm sure most of you have heard about these rumors, that maybe they were bouncing around the idea of Wilder versus Martin, but now, at least based on the rumors, that idea is kaput. The question here is, do I believe the rumors? You have to understand that you have to take everything you hear with a grain of salt. It's not like a fight between them was ever confirmed. It's not like a fight between them was ever official. The fight itself was a matter of speculation. The fight itself was rumored, as these rumors are rumored. But now, that fight fizzled out. The reason that I can believe it is because we don't actually know what Wilder's going to do next. We ain't got the foggiest fucking idea when this guy is going to be returning to action, if at all. Understand, Wilder lost to Tyson Fury in February of last year. In between then and now, a lot has happened. Daniel Dubois, late last year, suffered his first professional loss, and we're already hearing news of when we can expect Daniel to come back. Preliminary reports state that he'll be cleared to fight by April. But when it comes to Wilder, We've no such news. We don't know when this guy's coming back or what he's going to be doing. And that lends credence to the notion that perhaps they were playing with the idea of Wilder versus Martin, but Wilder still wants to get paid the way he got paid for the Fury fight. And that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen because he's not a champion anymore. That's not going to happen because the audiences aren't back yet. We're in the middle of a pandemic. That's not going to happen because this is supposed to be your comeback fight.
Right.
Your comeback fight might get some attention by way of social media, but it's not a mega event. You know, you want mega money, you need a mega event. You need a big fight.
You do.
Is that what the Charles Martin fight would have been? Would that have been a big fight? Would that have been the kind of fight that you can put on pay-per-view for $80 a pop? Is that what that would have been? Because I'll tell you something, if they tried that shit, it wouldn't work out.
Yeah, see what that Luis Ortiz rematch did on pay-per-view.
I'll tell you that on free TV, that fight could put up some big ratings. Wilder's ring return on regular old network television, like Fox, it could put up some very big ratings, it could. But if you think for a second the average American boxing fan is going to pay $80 to see Wilder fight Charles Martin, that's where you fucked up.
Why would they even try to put it on pay-per-view?
Because of Wilder's purse demands. Hypothetically speaking, the only reason you'd put a fight like that on pay-per-view, a fight that doesn't belong on pay-per-view, the only reason you'd really do that is to satisfy the financial demands of one or both of the fighters. That maybe the network is unwilling to put up the kind of money that the fighters want to get paid. Maybe the network doesn't want to put that up for them, so they'll let those guys gamble in the pay-per-view market. That would have to be the reason that you put a fight like that on pay-per-view. Now, once again, we're just brainstorming here. This is all hypothetical. None of this is confirmed because the fight was never announced. The fight was never official to begin with. But if you're asking yourself, why would anyone, God's green earth, so decide to put Wilder versus Charles Martin on pay-per-view? That would have to be the why. That would have to be the reason. The reason you do that is to satisfy the price demands of the fighters. And that lends credence to the notion that, at least according to Rick Glacier, Wilder, he's got some hefty financial demands that aren't going to be met. They're not going to be met because he's coming off a loss. They're not going to be met because he's not a champion anymore. They're not going to be met because these are hardly ideal times, ideal circumstances to drive such a hard bargain.
That might have fucked that fight right up.
With a rumor, such as this one, it really is always a question of whether or not you can believe it. Until something is announced, until something is official, until more information is released and divulged. When it comes to rumors like this, it's always a question of whether or not you can believe it. And based on what's being said, yeah, I could see that. I could entertain that. I could believe it. That Wilder still wants to get paid the way he got paid for the Tyson Fury fight. I told you guys before, in many ways, he was overpaid for that fight.
And what denotes overpayment?
Paying a fighter a sum of money, a greater sum than that fighter can bring back to you. Bring back to you in terms of ticket sales, bring back to you in terms of pay-per-view buys. The Wilder versus Fury rematch did very well at the gate. It did. But in terms of pay-per-view buys, at least based on reports, it didn't break even. It doesn't break even. That means you lost money. You lost money putting this thing together.
Wilder was said to have made $30 million from that fight.
We don't know here today if what Wilder is expecting is $30 million more or just something in that neighborhood. But if that's the case, if that's what he's waiting for to climb back into the squared cycle, he's going to be waiting a long time because I don't see anybody giving him that. Not in the near future. Least of all for Charles Martin. I mean, come on.
Who's gonna stake $30 million of their own dollars for that fucking fight?
Who's gonna stake $20 million for that fucking fight? It's a comeback fight, and it's a comeback fight that could get some attention, but it ain't no $20 million fight. And just in keeping with news coming out of the heavyweight division per a tweet from Michael Benson, Eddie Hearn has told reporters they've received comments back from Top Rank on the Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury draft contract and are now working through them. Minor issues still to be decided, including whose name is first, who ring walks first, etc., etc. You don't see me broaching this subject all that much as of late because at this point it would be hair-splitting, minutia. The important aspects of this situation are already ironed out. They've already agreed to a 50-50 split, you understand. Thus, whose ring walk comes out first,
Second.
Whatever. Those are minute details that don't get in the way of the fight happening, as both teams, both parties know. This is the biggest fight they could be involved in. This is the biggest fight, not just in heavyweight boxing, but in boxing today. What other fight stands to make the two guys involved $100 million apiece. You tell me, what other fight involving what other fighters, where is paying out that much right now?
You think they're gonna be stuck on something as minute as who comes out first?
What kind of stuff is this? You think they're gonna bring negotiations to a screeching halt based on what brand of bottled water they're putting in the guys' locker rooms? Evian or Fiji, Poland Spring or otherwise? As far as I'm concerned, the fight itself is pretty much a done deal, and they're just ironing out the kinks, ironing out the minute wrinkles. I can tell you that from where I'm sitting, evidence leads me to believe that Anthony Joshua is the bigger draw, the bigger marquee attraction, and he always was.
He still is.
And he still is. Did you guys forget what Anthony Joshua's reported earnings were for that Andy Ruiz fight? They were in the neighborhood of what he stands to make for this fight. Something close to $100 million. Something to the tune of $85 million. That's almost 3 times what Tyson Fury made beating up Wilder in that rematch.
$30 million.
And what did Tyson Fury's ticket sales look like in the absence of Deontay Wilder? How many tickets did he move for the Tom Schwartz fight or the Otto Verleen fight? Do you guys remember? Was a little over 5,000 tickets sold. A gate that didn't even generate $1 million.
That was for the Tom Schwartz fight.
That was in the absence of Deontay Wilder. We know that the gate for the Wilder fight, the Wilder rematch, I should say, it did substantially better business, but, that was with Wilder. Without Wilder, we see what his ticket sales look like. Those two guys needed each other to make a mega match, to make a big fight, a big mega event.
Fury himself doesn't move as many tickets as AJ does.
It's a common sense argument from where I'm sitting, though I wouldn't lose much sleep over it in a debate because, like I said, as far as I'm concerned, the fight is done. And these are minute details that don't get in the way of the fight.
They don't.
They already agreed to a 50-50 split anyway,
I mean, who cares who comes out first?
Do you really want to waste your time on social media arguing about that?
Some people just like to argue.